Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Today I've got two new exotic materials to play with, the first of which is fossilized woolly mammoth tooth. This particular tooth has been stabilized and casted in resin, and we'll see what it's like to work this material. It's new to me, so I'm sure I'm going to learn a couple of things in the video that I'm going to pass on to you. The second material is ancient bog oak. This is an oak tree that was preserved in the peat bogs for hundreds if not thousands of years. Generally it has a dark brown, if not blackish color. The first thing I want to do is bore a hole through the woolly mammoth tooth, and then I'm going to mill a slot. The first thing I notice is that each different layer has a different density, so some layers drill really easily and some layers are very difficult to drill through. Even though the material is fossilized, it still smells like you're sitting in a dentist chair while you're working on it. It immediately became apparent that this material does chip very easily. I do believe it's a good idea to go ahead and try to get your slot cut in as early as possible, and then you can remove material from both sides so that you can mitigate any chipping on your mating surfaces. Here's the tooth. And what I've done here is I've taken the round corners left behind by the end mill and I've created nice square corners using files. It took me quite a bit of experimentation with different files to figure out what would cut this material. My standard Nicholson files wouldn't even touch this material, so I had to switch over to these diamond files, which still had a pretty hard go at it, but they would file away the material. This took me about an hour, and you can see there's very little dust on the work surface there to file out these corners. The next thing I'm going to want to do is clean up my mating surfaces on the top and the bottom, where they're going to meet with the other handle material and the guard. Oh yeah, that's awesome. That's going to be a really sweet blade. This is a piece of 1084 we're going to use for the guard material.
Oh shit. Sure.
How about we try that one again? A very small amount of dicum needs to be applied here, not quite as much used in the previous scene. We're going to scribe a center line. We're going to make the guard. All we need to do here is just mill a slot, and then we're going to add some texturing. You'll notice that while I'm using my milling machine, I like to use a chip brush. Old-time machinists will tell you these machines were never intended for the use of compressed air to blow those chips around. And if you use compressed air, it's just going to blow the chips into your ways and you're going to cause damage on your machine. Every old machinist will tell you to use a chip brush instead of compressed air. This is a very similar process to what I just did on the tooth. I'm filing out the inside corners that are going to fit up next to the tang on the guard material here. We're going to add some texturing. I'm using a small ball peen hammer and just going at it with a random feel. I'm going to go over the entire surface here. I think that looks really nice and it's going to complement our ancient materials. This is how I protect the knife as I go ahead and put the guard material on. I take a nice thick piece of leather, wrap it around the knife, that way I can clamp it in my vise securely. It holds it really nice and tight and won't mar the finish of your blade. Pro tip, when hammering on a hardened object, use a mallet so that it doesn't shatter in your face. Look at that, that was a nice good fit up on the guard material. Here I'm showing you how to get your material laid out. I want the handle to be upswept, so I make sure the handle is in the shape that I want. I scribe a new line that matches up with my mating surface, and I'm going to cut that off, and here we go. I went ahead and bored out the inside of this material already. I didn't want to bore you with that, so I went ahead and did it off camera, and here's how I lay out my pin location. I just pulled it out, laid it on top, and I'll mark my pin location, and then we'll go over and drill that out for the pin. It's just like they say, the circle marks the spot. The bog oak does drill and work very easily. This is the process I use for the glue up on all my hidden tang knives. I clamp my knife horizontally in a vise, and then I put all my pieces on. Here's something neat right here. Did you see how I used my fingers to block the pinhole? If you don't do that, when you slide your handle material on, it's going to try to force all the epoxy out the pinholes. If you do it the way that I did it and you block those holes when you slide the block on, it forces the epoxy forward into your forward sections of the handle. And then you apply your pen, clamp it up with your clamp, and let it set overnight. Now would also be the time to check alignment on all your pieces to make sure that they're true and straight in line with your blade. After glue up, the first thing we want to do is give ourselves a nice flat surface to do layout, so we go ahead and grind off the extra pin material and any epoxy that might be protruding from the side. Here's the rough profile that I'm going to go ahead and grind in. Take note that I have a lot of extra material here. That is by design. Let me explain. I've never worked either one of these materials, so with that extra material, it's going to allow me to get a feel for how the material grinds on the machine, and if I was close to my final dimensions, if I did make a mistake, it would affect my end product. Whereas right now, if I make a mistake, I'll be able to fix it. Right there, I tested to see how the material holds heat while I'm grinding it. And here's where I learned my first lesson. Right there. Did you see the mistake? Yes. I ground from my soft material into the hard material and it got caught on my belt, causing a divot. The best way to do this would be to start with your harder material and grind off of the hard material into the soft material so you don't get the belt caught between the two transitions. Now that we have our profile completely ground in all the way around, I've laid the knife on a 1, 2, 3 block, and I'm using my height gauge to go ahead and scribe a center line that's true with the cutting edge of the knife, and then I'm going to adjust that height gauge up so that I can mark a line on both sides of this block to give me my outer dimensions of my handle. The block is slightly out of true from the knife, so by doing this, it gives me grind to lines that are perfectly true with the cutting edge, and I'll walk over to my grinder and I'll go ahead and take off the excess material, and that will leave me with a perfectly square and true block of material that is trued up to the cutting edge of the knife. Very important process right here. Here are the 3 lines. You have a center line and 2 outer lines. And the outer lines are going to be my grind to lines to true this block up. It's a very simple procedure from here. You just go ahead and grind off the extra material. I do take the knife, I grind in this direction, and then I turn it upside down and I grind in the other direction so that I make sure that I don't overshoot my lines on any one of the corners or top or bottom of the knife as I'm grinding off the excess. Now that I have a perfect block to work with, I'm going to go into my finishing techniques. I would like this top swedge, the line for the swedge, to flow right into the handle. So I'm going to go ahead and mark out my distance here at the top of the blade, and I'm going to transfer that right onto the handle so that when it's finished, that line flows right from the tip all the way to the butt of the knife. This is by design. Now we just step up to the grinder and we go ahead and we grind off these facets that we've marked out. It is still very important to grind your harder material first and then drag the knife right off into that softer material. You could chase the softer material to match your harder material. It would be very hard to make your harder material match your soft material. So go ahead and grind that forward section first, get your angles in where you like them, and then drag the knife off into that softer material. I like to rough in these facets on my grinder, and then I throw my knife in a jig and I file all these facets nice and true and really get them dialed in by hand. We're going to do the exact same process in the hand sanding. We're going to take this 500 grit and we're going to focus with a hard backer on our harder materials before we move into the softer material. You'll notice that the efforts do pay off here. The transitions between the soft and hard materials are absolutely flawless in the end. Definitely worth the extra work here, guys. When you hold something in your hand, you can very easily feel ridges between two transitions, and a good knife maker tries to get those transitions to be absolutely seamless, so that if you close your eyes, it feels like one seamless piece of material from end to end. It's the little tips and tricks like this that eventually add up. If you start adding these to your normal routine when you make knives, it's going to elevate your entire process and your end products are going to start to shine. Speaking of shine, I'm going to whip out my trusty Mother's Mag aluminum polish and I'm going to give that Mammoth molar a nice good buffing, really bring out the shine in it. And then I am going to go ahead and try this on the Bog Oak. I don't think the Bog Oak is actually hard enough for this to have any cut, but we're going to try it anyway. Okay, so the mothers didn't really work on the Bog Oak, so I cleaned it off with acetone, and now I'm going to use a tung oil blend to go ahead and infiltrate the grain and the pores of that Bog Oak. And I found that the tung oil worked the best for the Bog Oak, definitely. I tried tung oil, I tried the teak oil, and the tung oil absolutely infiltrated the grain and really made that Bog Oak shine. I think it looks great. It also brought the color of the oak out. I was hoping for this oak to have a finished color a little darker, more like a black, but this brown worked out even better because I think that it complements the Mammoth molar just perfectly. What do you guys think? Was all the extra effort and time that it took to shape and polish that molar, was it worth it? Do you think that that section of the Mammoth molar really sets this knife apart from other knives that I've made? I don't know. Tell me down in the comments, what do you guys think?